Hello. Most of us in the UK will be thinking of today as Remembrance Day, Armistice Day, and we'll be thinking very much about those who died in the wars, or those servicemen and women who gave up their lives for the service of their country. It's also, for those of us in the church, St. Martin's Day, St. Martin of Tours. Now, he was a soldier as well, and indeed what he was responsible for was while still waiting to be baptised, he did something quite, daring, in that he found a beggar who was very badly clothed and freezing. So, being the generous man that he was, he cut his military cloak in half and gave half to the beggar. And later on that night, had a vision of our blessed Lord, clothed in that half cloak, and that propelled him forward into baptism. Later on became Bishop of Tours. And so you see there's already a connection with Armistice Day and with St. Martin. And what we think of here is courage. St. Martin had the idea of doing something that would have really put him at odds with his superiors. To cut his military cloak in half is not a simple matter. It's desecrating a uniform. But the purpose was quite important, very important. Likewise, all those servicemen and women, anyone who's in any of the armed forces, has to be trained to go into combat, to fight, and to be courageous. At this point, we have to think about what courage is. Courage is one of the classical virtues, and it's coupled with an emotion. And that emotion is fear. Because courage, in the words of a book I think I've got somewhere, courage is about feeling the fear, but doing the action anyway. Being afraid to die, but nonetheless giving up one's life. Being afraid of losing one's reputation, but still cutting a cloak up to clothe a beggar. And that brings us to a very other interesting point. Where are we in our society being courageous? There are lots of sort of conspiracy theories wandering about. Now, what's that got to do with fear? Conspiracy theories come from fear. That's where they have their root. Now, given that conspiracy theories exist because there have been conspiracies in the past, you can sort of see that there's at least a reason why these things exist. Governments cover things up. Sadly, churches cover things up as well. And so the idea of conspiracy theory, that something's going on that we don't know about, it's a fear. You can sort of get that fear. For example, there is a conspiracy theory about the COVID vaccinations. And there are lots of arguments that anti-vaxxers use. Now, I'm not saying that they're wrong, and I'm not saying that they're right either. I'm using this as an example. But anti-vaccination campaigners have a fear. And that fear is that governments are using the vaccinations as a means of control. And they argue that the vaccinations aren't actually necessary, but that that the governments are trying to control how their population works by requiring the vaccinations. That may, or it may not, be true. But you can certainly see that the concern about this sort of anti-vaccinations is born of a fear. And that fear is fear of being controlled, a loss of freedom. And that's something that we should worry about. To lose freedom is a serious matter. Likewise, those who are trying to get vaccinations mandatory are working on a basis of a fear as well, and that is for the spread of this horrible virus. And their view is that if not enough people are vaccinated, then this virus will keep getting hold. You can see the same sort of thing with the climate change debate. There are those who fear the loss of their livelihood, and there are those who fear the loss of the planet. And so fear plays a big part in our society, what we are afraid of. And that's where courage comes in. Because courage is about feeling the fear, but doing the right thing anyway. That's how the martyrs did it. That's how the great confessors did it. Those people who suffered torture for their faith, that's how they did it. They feared the torture, but they went through it for the love of God. And that brings us to the fact of the matter that fear is an emotion. And therefore it just is. It's neither right nor wrong. It is a subjective fact. It's true because that's how you're feeling. And the question is, should we allow that fear to rule us? Now, if we don't acknowledge the fear, then we can be foolhardy. We can rush into things all guns blazing and do a lot of damage because we don't feel the fear. We don't take into account what the fear is saying. But on the other side, if we fear too much, then we fall into some form of paralysis. And that's essentially what we mean by virtue. The virtue is sort of a middle ground between the two. Feeling fear, acknowledging the fear, counting the cost, but doing the right thing anyway. We need to know what the right thing to do is. So virtues are very, very much the middle ground between two extremes. That's what Aristotle taught. And beyond Aristotle was just giving a language to the way that we experience life. And you'll see his virtues in church teaching in the Bible, along with the three great theological virtues of faith, hope and love. The question that we have to ask ourselves is what we really fear and why we fear it. The great prayer of Compline, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil's roaring lion, prowleth around seeking whom he may devour, whom resist steadfast in the faith. Roaring lions are something to be afraid of, but if they're roaring, they're giving their position away. It's a rather stupid lion, but nonetheless, we fear the roar. And that makes us tremble. We have to be sober. And we have to be vigilant. And we need to do the right thing. So, being careful then. St. Martin is careful. He knows what the right thing to do is. To clothe the beggar is as an act of mercy. and it's an act that earns him, I want to say brownie points with God, but that seems rather trivial. It earns him a place in God's affections, and points him out to be a good leader of the church. And likewise, we think of those men and women who, believing that they were doing the right thing, went out and gave their lives to stop evil. And we have to thank them so much for that. The end of the dreadful concentration camps, the end of dreadful losses of life, the end of genocide. There are still a lot more injustices in our society that we will need to go into battle for. But we do so not from a place of fear, but from a place of courage. We look for the good thing to do despite feeling afraid. We don't let the fear rule us. Too many people do. Too many people are afraid of something and they allow that fear to consume them. So God bless you. Be not afraid, as the angel tells Our Lady. God bless you, that you may understand your fears and may have the grace to overcome them and to be courageous. God bless you as soldiers for Christ. God bless you knowing that our Lord has already won the victory for us. God bless you, and please pray for me.